Hello and welcome, I'm Tefera Gedamu. My guest today, Nigel Chapman, the CEO of Plan International, a British NGO since 2009, comes from a background in broadcasting. He served in top positions at the BBC. Well, beyond stated commitments, what are organizations like his actually doing? Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
You have this new campaign, Because I Am a Girl. What is new in there?
An awful lot is new about it. I mean, it's a very determined campaign to raise issues around girls' rights and girls' opportunities. I mean, I think the plight of girls around the world is one of the great injustices. They are the biggest marginalised group in the world, and I'm passionate about it for two reasons. First of all, it's an issue of justice, that there shouldn't be so many girls who have less good opportunities than boys. There shouldn't be so many women who have less good opportunities than men. So it's an issue kind of morality almost for me and justice. But secondly, it's also an issue of practical economics, because we know that when we invest in the girl child, through education in particular, the longer they stay on at school, the better equipped they are to get jobs, the more they earn, and the more they reinvest that money in their own community and family. And that helps to break the cycle of poverty. It's not going to be the only thing that's going to do that, but it's very, very important as an ingredient in tackling poverty. So that's why, for us, it's very, very important.
I know it's very important, but it's not new, is it?
Well, it's no, of course, there are other organisations that have tackled issues around girls and violence and schooling and so on. But the reason why I think it's a very opportune time to do it is, the debate about education has been around access. Since the Millennium Development Goals were established some 15 years ago, it's all been about primary school access. And many countries, including this one in Ethiopia, have made substantial progress in access. But access is not the only part of the issue.
What is?
Quality. Staying on at school for a reasonable length of time. I mean, if you drop out of school at the end of your primary school education, you're not going to be equipped. You're not going to be equipped to get a good job, to compete in an age where technology and skills are becoming more and more prevalent. So this whole issue about longevity is very, very important.
I absolutely agree. But the issue here is, you have to get parents interested in sending their kids, particularly girls, to school. When there is no interest of that sort, talking about quality is something superfluous.
Well, but the issue is about the quality of the education that all children receive. But the arguments are powerful arguments to parents and to anybody who looks after children that the investment they're going to make in education by encouraging their children to stay on school, particularly their girls to stay on school, is going to pay them back big time in the future. That's the point. And we have to convince and argue and persuade with real passion and fervour, frankly, with families that this is a long-term investment. It's a short-sighted view to take children out of school early. You may be able to bolster your family income by having that child work in the family business or do domestic stuff at home or whatever. But you may need to do those things, but actually in the long run, it's a short-sighted view because the child is not going to be sufficiently equipped to get the sort of job which in the long term will make a difference to the family, difference to the community, and difference to their chances of escaping poverty in the long run. And that's the argument.
Well, that's true. But are you not putting the cart before the horse when you talk about quality of education before you even try to provide access to those girls, to those kids, access to education?
No, but the two
I'm interested in this discussion because I'm interested about priorities.
Yes, but the two are linked together. If girls go to school and have a poor experience for whatever reason, it could be because they're worried about intimidation and violence and bullying in school, or the curriculum is not appropriate for them, it doesn't feel it meets their needs, then they're more likely to drop out. So the quality issue is linked to the longevity of being in school. So the two, you can't just cut them apart and say, well, let's just do access. Access will solve it. You have to have access, you have to have them going to school and staying on at school, and you have to have them having a quality education when they're at school. And the issue for many countries now is that the MDG goal, which was all about the percentage going into primary, and it didn't talk about secondary education. It doesn't talk about secondary education at all. This whole bit about access distorts the agenda. It was a sort of first step, but it's only the first step on a journey where we have to make sure that all children, and girls in particular, because they're on the whole more disadvantaged than boys, that they get the sort of quality education.
Okay, what comes to your mind when you talk about children? And more so about girls when you want about empowering them, when you talk about empowering kids in the years ahead, particularly girls, because they are the most disenfranchised in society. We agree on that, right?
Yes.
So what comes to your mind? Is it education? What?
Well,
You know, I know it's a complex...
The disenfranchisement is working on
but-
different levels, isn't it? It's first of all working on the lack of opportunity to acquire the sort of skills which will enable you to get the sort of job which will make your life better and make the investment, as I said earlier, in the family and the community that you want to make. That's the issue. But the second issue is when you're talking about empowerment, one of the things I noticed about plans work is that when we work with children and young people over time, they blossom because of the relationship working with us and with the way we work with them, which is participatory and allows their voice to be heard. And I see these young people flowering, working with Plan, to become the leaders of the future because they have the confidence then to tackle authority. I mean, one of the issues, one of the things about education is not just about technical skills, it's about a rounded individual. I've always believed this very strongly. I'm passionate about education.
What is a rounded individual?
A rounded individual is somebody who's got an intellectual curiosity, who is well read, who's got an inquiring mind, and a mind that challenges authority sometimes. And actually, if we're going to improve governance, if we're going to hold leaders to account, if we're going to hold powerful people to account to deliver what they should for their citizens, you want a citizenship which is confident in tackling those issues and in tackling authority. And that is all linked up to education, because when you have information, when you have confidence, when you can speak well, when you're articulate, you're much more likely to be able to tackle vested interests and people who prevent the delivery of good and strong services for society and for citizens. And so they're totally umbilically linked together.
No. You've released a report on the state of whatever children, is that right?
The State of the World's Girls, it's an annual report.
Girls and so on, and you particularly focus, on girls. You talk about health issues, you talk about education, you talk about empowering girls, you talk about a number of things. The report is quite grim.
Well,
so does it make the work a lot more challenging?
Yeah, the work is very challenging, but you can take a cup half empty or a cup half full view about tackling poverty.
Which one are you?
I generally take a cup half full view, because I think if we present the battle against poverty as a grim, unremitting fight where there's no progress being made, it's not factually accurate, because there is quite a lot of progress being made, and it doesn't give people hope. And these are deep-seated problems. And if people who are working in the area don't have hope they can be resolved, then frankly, the chances of resolving them are very, very low. So I'm a cup half full person, but that last sort of part of the journey is a very tough part of the journey.
If you are on that half full side of the equation, I understand you realize the amount of money and investment that these kinds of interventions require. Doesn't that make you a little bit pessimistic, you think?
Well, I think, no, not really, because I think over time, if you look at the MDG goals against the 8 areas, there is substantial progress being made against most of them in many, many places. Less progress in Africa than in other places, that's factually correct. But actually, generally speaking, there is a reasonable level of progress being made. So that's why I'm reasonably optimistic. Now, of course it requires investment. But my job is to passionately advocate that education and health should come top of the agenda of aid spending, top of the agenda of government spending, rather than, if I can put it bluntly, spending it on military hardware and some things that governments spend their money on. I mean, if governments care about societies, and we care about society, we want to see them flourish, then strong public services around health and education are core to that, and they're core to the rights of the individual. That's the other point. 192 countries have signed up to the Convention on the Rights of the Child. Now, do they mean it or not? It's one thing to say it, will they do it? And we have to put pressure on them through advocacy, working with them on policy work and so on, as well as working at grassroots level in the community to persuade them to invest properly for the future of their own society.
You mean working to pressure governments in your own country? Is that one of the
well,
things?
Not so much in the UK. Because in the UK,
you raise funds in the UK, don't you?
We do. We raise funds in the UK. We raise funds in 19 other countries in the so-called developed Western world.
But it all started in the UK, right?
It started in 1937 in the UK, but we obviously were raising more money, frankly, in Germany and Canada and other places than we are now in the UK. But I don't see the plan's focus to engage in sort of domestic politics around, the provision of education for British school children. That's not our job. It is perfectly good for us to engage in the politics around the aid budget and why Britain should stick to the 0.7% of GDP. and how other countries should strive towards that. Absolutely, that's part of our job, because we think that without that level of investment as part of the answer to poverty, not the whole answer, then we will slip backwards. So we do advocate for that. But we also, I think more importantly, work with governments around the world to put issues on the agenda and to take their feet to the fire, if you like, and say, right, well, if you really believe in education, you really believe in these issues, how much are you spending on this? Are you spending enough? Are you spending it wisely? And can we support you in a way? And one of the things I've noticed on my travels is that, many ministers of education don't have clear strategies about education, or ministers of health don't have clear strategies about health. They need that support from us. So it's not just what we do at grassroots level. It's also the ideas that we can generate and work with them to improve the quality of their thinking about the solutions for their own society.
That sounds paternalistic.
No, it doesn't. It sounds just sharing good intellectual ideas.
Well, I know, but you seem to be indicating, you seem to be pushing the idea that most governments don't know what to do with what they have.
I'm giving you my experience. My experience is that when I've talked to governments around the world, some have, serious apparatus and serious strategic thinkers are alongside them who they're drawing ideas from and have a coherent strategy, and some are undercooked, frankly, in that area because they don't have access to the right people, they don't have invested in. That's a fact. And it's not helped by the fact that in many governments, ministers come and go through portfolios very quickly, particularly in education and health, rather than having the longevity you'd look for. So these are all factors why you don't always get a coherent approach to these issues. So if Plan can support by lending people to work with them, giving advice, working on policy work, we will happily do it. And actually, it's often the best investment we make because it helps to bring a more coherent approach to an issue than Plan trying to do it for people or for governments through direct service delivery at the grassroots level. We still do that. We still build schools, But in this country, there are something like 30,000 schools, and Plan builds 30, 50, whatever. So we're not going to be the school builder for Ethiopia. But what we can be is somebody working alongside government on issues of curriculum, on issues of governance, of education, on those sort of issues, which are hard issues to tackle. I mean, to be honest, putting up a school, bricks and mortar, is the easy bit. The hard bit about education is the curriculum, the quality of the teaching. So that's a much more difficult thing to tackle, and that's something that we want to work with governments.
Do you squeeze yourself in, or you're invited to kind of help?
I think we're invited to help, and the reason why we're invited to help is because our commitment to development is a long-term commitment. Something like 70% of Plan's funds around the world come from individual supporters who sponsor a child for up to 18 years. So that we're
it's a race against time to tell your funders that you've done a good job.
Well, we need to keep on telling them that we've done a good job, but the good thing about our funders is that they're committed alongside us for the long game. If you're an INGO which is dependent upon grant income, money comes in and out, 2 or 3 year cycles, it's very hard to make that long-term commitment. So the reason why governments take Plan seriously, this government does, and in Ethiopia and other governments around the world I talk to do, is because we're doing the hard yards. We're doing the long haul here because our commitment to communities is over 10, 15, 20 years. We're not a here today, gone tomorrow INGO. There are plenty of those people around, but we're not one of them.
You're not one of them, but you are one of the plenty international organizations operating in Ethiopia, focusing on children, on girls, and everything. I see a duplication of work here.
Well, you'll have to explain to me where you see the duplication. Well, I think we are quite focused.
All of you focus on children.
Yes.
All of you focus on education, girls' empowerment.
Yes, but there's a lot of work to do. There's a lot of work to do here.
Well, the issue is not. Yes, of course, there is a lot of work to do, but the issue is you don't coordinate your efforts. This is what your critics say. You come to Ethiopia with a number of priorities, designed per your mission, and then you're on the ground operating, and you're not even in agreement with each other. You don't even have a solid agenda to move the issues further down the road.
I utterly reject that, and let me explain why I utterly reject it. First of all, about 90% of the staff who work for Plan Ethiopia are Ethiopian. So there's all these people coming in from outside.
No.
Let me answer the question.
I'm not talking about the number of Ethiopian staff. I mean, I'm also similar with other organizations. What I'm pointing at is this. I'm talking about your set of interventions. They're similar to each other.
Yes,
at times,
yes.
You need to coordinate.
Yes, because of course it'd be very surprising if, after doing all the research on girls' education, you came up with sort of eureka approaches which were completely dissimilar from other INGOs. That would be surprising. But what I can say to you, there's a lot of coordination going on. I mean, we may have our distinct geographical centres of activity, but there is coordination around policy, around thinking. I mean, Plan Ethiopia is part of all sorts of groups that work with other INGOs around education and health issues. We're not living in splendid isolation.
Well, HOV are trying to make yourself visible. Yes. That's a question.
Well, but we're working closely with them. So I reject the charge. I reject the charge absolutely that Plan is some sort of isolationist INGO that's coming in from outside, that doesn't understand the local conditions, that it doesn't want to work with other people. We have, in Plan globally, we have all sorts of alliances going on. We have alliances with over 50 corporates around the world. We have alliances with a huge number of donors and funders. We have alliances with something like 5,000 civil society organisations who we support and fund to do work on our behalf and with us. So the notion that INGOs are kind of not alliance builders, which is kind of the thrust of your question, I refute it.
On Sunday you had 4,000 kids running. I'm a girl.
Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah, in order to raise awareness of those issues, to raise awareness of the dangers of child marriage, and particularly in that impediment to education. And that's about...
Was that helpful?
Well, of course it is, because it's about awareness raising. It's about getting messages across. I mean,
but people come to enjoy themselves.
Yes, they do.
Is that one of the ways?
Well, of course they come to... Look, poverty...
They don't even care. I mean, look, I'm not sure. Care. They have a bottle of water. They have all this...
yeah, well, of course. I'm not saying that every...
shirts with your logos back and front.
I'm not sure that every runner knows all about the issues, of course not. But mass public outreach through supporting sporting events is one way in which you can raise awareness about issues. And in some ways it's a very effective way, because it's doing it in a kind of gentler way than very, very sort of powerful targeted advocacy in a kind of rather serious way. You've got to use different weapons, different tools to engage publics. And sponsoring of sporting events, supporting them, raising the issue, that's cool, that's enough. If it gets the issue talked about in homes and families in Ethiopia and among the many visitors who come from around the world to take part in these races, then I think it's a perfectly reasonable thing to do as part of a armoury, if you like, of ways in which you're going to reach out to people and raise that issue, which is a terribly important issue.
Have you succeeded, do you think?
Well, I think we succeed year on year. I think the longer you support these sort of events, and you do it not just for 1 year, but for 2, 3, 4, and 5, and they grow bigger, then we've always supported the children's races. We're also supporting the older runners as well. So I think that we're doing our bit, and I think it's important that we raise that awareness. And if as a result of that, people talk about because I'm a girl, if they ask about it, if they talk about it in their families and their communities about the importance of it, it's done its job. That's good enough. It doesn't have to solve it, but if you can raise awareness of it, that's good enough.
Are people aware of that, you think, of the plight girls face, not only in this country, but also elsewhere in the world? I
think increasingly so.
Did you talk to some girls in town?
I've talked to girls all over the world about this. And actually, I go back to the point, it's not what I say, some of the most articulate advocates of girls' rights and girls' opportunities are girls themselves. And when we launched the Because I'm a Girl campaign in New York a month ago, there were speakers from the UN, there were speakers from business, of course there were. But actually the best speakers, the most articulate, the most powerful advocates were girls themselves. So, it's not my job to go and do all the talking. It's also to create opportunities for girls to do the talking. And they're the best persuaders of their families and other girls to take the opportunity of education and health and all these issues more seriously than they would otherwise do. So that's part of our strategy of engagement.
You like sound bites, don't you? A number of girls came to New York and talked, and they're great speakers and stuff like that. So if you want to get the message across the board, definitely you need to have girls who are the best advocates of themselves.
Absolutely.
I'm thinking, when I said, do you like sound bites? I mean, you come from a background in
broadcasting,
broadcasting, radio and television.
Yes,
is that what you're?
Yes, and I think they are. And the point is, it's not just what they say, it's how they say it. I think there was, we had speakers from Cameroon, we had speakers from other parts of Africa, we had speakers from Latin America, And, in some cases, they brought the house down, literally brought tears to the eyes of people who should commit themselves more strongly to these issues. And in the first International Day of the Girl Child, which took place on the 11th of October this year, would never have happened if it hadn't been for Plan Girls going to the UN and other agencies and saying, right, we need to do this, and persuading ministers from Canada and other places to advocate for it and to force it through the United Nations. And so we now have this day of focus. This is one day a year when this issue is right at the top of the political agenda. And the reason why I'm optimistic, I feel momentum. I feel momentum around this issue now, not just here in Ethiopia, but across the world. And I think that's very encouraging. And I think as time wears on, I think we will start to redress this unjust imbalance in the opportunities which girls and women, but particularly girls, face.
You worked for the BBC for 30 plus years, and you left in 2009, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Terrible things are happening at the BBC as we speak, and I don't want to let you go without talking about that.
Well,
was that a disappointing? Certainly it was.
Yeah,
yes,
look, for somebody who worked at the BBC for...
Expected, you think?
No, I wouldn't say it's expected. Look, BBC makes hours and hours of news and current affairs broadcasting across radio and television and new media. It's not going to be a place without making mistakes. Mistakes happen. Mistakes came close together here on a program which, frankly, I started my journalistic career on. So for me, seeing the word Newsnight in the same sentence as scandal or mistakes or poor journalism is a painful experience.
You seem to be taking it lightly. Is it because you've been part of it?
No, I'm not taking it lightly. It's serious, but you also have to see it in the context of all the BBC does. And of course, in the last 10 years, the BBC's been through ups and downs. There have been issues around, there were issues around competitions and stuff and phony entries 2 or 3 years ago, and then there was issue around Hutton and the whole issue about the reporting of the Iraq War. So and now you now go through these issues around the reporting of abuse and what this presenter Jimmy Savile was doing, and should they have put the program out? And these things go through cycles, but you have to put it in the context that the BBC makes thousands and thousands of hours of broadcasting every year. A lot of it is around news and current affairs. Most of it is extremely high quality. And also the other thing I'd say about it as an organisation, somebody now sits from outside, is, I don't see many media organisations self-critically examining their failures in the public eye in the way in which the BBC does.
Well,
I don't see the Murdoch papers doing that. I don't see other people doing that. So I think that says something about the culture.
The BBC guys have to be caught, basically red-handed, to admit that they have made a serious mistake.
Yes, well, of course, but
they didn't,
we're human, aren't we?
They were not proactive. They were reacting, weren't they? Because, look at what the News Right story, which
I think you're being
basically shelved.
I think yes, but we still don't know the precise reasons why the Newsnight story on Jimmy Savile was shelved. That's an inquiry that's going on at the moment, and we don't know precisely why that was.
But we know what we know, and that is a serious. It's not a mistake, but serious.
Well, on the second story, that's correct. On the second story about the which connected abuse in Wales with the former treasurer of the Conservative Party. Yes, the BBC,
way back in the 80s.
The BBC's way back in the 80s. The BBC's admitted that they got that wrong, and that they rushed to put that out, and it didn't stand up, and they've apologised, and they've paid damages, and they're drawing a line under that now. And I think they've drawn a line under it quickly. I think that was an appropriate thing to do. When you make a mistake in journalism and in broadcasting of a serious nature, you need to put your hand up and say, we got that wrong, and we need to draw a line and move on.
But quite often you say, we stand by our story.
Yeah, no, most of the time, 95, 98% of the time you stand by your story, and 98% of the time you do.
Unless someone comes flexing their muscles.
No, not because people come flexing their muscles.
Well, we've done that in the past.
No, I refute that. I never felt when I was working there,
that was right after you left. That's right after you left.
Director of the World Service, for 5 years, and previously to that, the deputy director. I never felt under any pressure by anybody flexing any muscles in relation to the journalism that my team were putting out. And if they ever did try and flex their muscles, my answer was a very short and pithy one. I would just reject it. And also, I would threaten to go public about the flexing of the muscles. And when people come and bully you about your journalism, and you then say, well, I'm going to tell the world about your bullying, then they tend to stop bullying.
Have you done that before?
I have. I would do this. I would do it. I would say I have said to people in the past, I don't think we want to have this
That's
conversation.
because you consider himself the powerful institution.
Yes, and also because the World Service has a tremendous reputation for the quality of its journalism, and therefore, it was frankly a silly politician or a silly leader who wanted to mix it with the World Service on those sort of issues, because the World Service had a fantastic reputation. If the World Service director said, "I'm being intimidated, people are flexing their muscles in a way that's preventing me putting out stories," I don't think I know who's going to win the argument on that.
Nigel Chapman, thank you very much for your time. It was a pleasure.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.